Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Conference Championship game reactions. One very exciting game and one not so exciting game. But before we jump into those games, just a quick bit of news, which is something we haven't had throughout the entire playoffs. But Kellen Moore, the pretty famous and pretty damn good offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, parted ways mutually with the Dallas team and is already expected to be picked up by the Los Angeles Chargers. So he'll be going from Dak to Justin Herbert. So it'll be really fun to see what he can do in LA.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does outside of Dallas. He spent his whole coaching career in Dallas, including being a backup quarterback for a few years. So it'll be nice to see if he's able to still perform offensively for another team outside of Dallas.
I personally think that the Chargers offense is much better healthy than the Cowboys offense was all year. So it'll be fun to see if he can continue his success. So now moving on to our two games, starting with the NFC Championship and the not so entertaining game. We had the 49ers heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, and the Eagles swamping them by the score of 31-7.
Yeah, this was unfortunately a bad game for the 49ers. It was really too bad. Brock Purdy got hurt early on, and they brought in their fourth quarterback of the season, and Josh Johnson, the veteran who's just been a journeyman his whole year. And even though it could have been his moment to shine, it was just too big and too much for him. And the Eagles got ahead way early, and once the 49ers weren't able to produce any offense, they slowly fell behind quickly, and it was just too much for them to overcome in the end.
Yeah, you really hate to see a team lose like this. I thought that the Eagles were going to win no matter what. If Brock Purdy stays healthy throughout that entire game, I still really do think the Eagles come out on top. They were just playing better even when Purdy wasn't there. But you hate to see a team lose like this. Josh Johnson went out later in the game, so Brock Purdy actually came back in. But I heard the announcer saying, and I've seen some reports saying, that it was a nerve thing in his wrist and he couldn't even feel his fingers on his throwing hand. So, of course, I think he had one pass attempt the entire second half when he was back in. And it was a screen that went absolutely nowhere. So, God, it's just really sad to see such a kind of Cinderella story type season for the 49ers end in such terror and such absolute falling apart due to injuries. I do feel like the Niners could have played that a little better. Kyle Shanahan is really creative with his offensive systems. They did try to get some of the crazier like double reverse pass back to Christian McCaffrey, but that didn't work. They gave a few runs to Debo and Kyle Juszczyk, but it was a tough situation. He could have gotten extremely creative and it still probably would have been a similar outcome. But I don't know. I just felt like handing the ball off to Christian McCaffrey was almost a sort of giving up. But
yeah, it did kind of feel that way a little bit. And there were talks about putting McCaffrey in at quarterback and just running a wildcat throughout the rest of the game. And I think that might have been more productive than anything.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Kyle Juszczyk, their fullback, I believe played quarterback in high school. So that, of course, high school and NFL are two very different things. But let him throw a few passes, just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
At least he's able to feel all his fingers. I mean, Purdy couldn't even throw the ball 10 yards downfield.
No, even the screen to McCaffrey, his only pass attempted the second half was very lofted, and you could just tell it didn't look comfortable. So sad end to the 49ers season, but the Philadelphia Eagles are now again in the Super Bowl. Moving on to the AFC Championship game, we had the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Kansas City to take on the 1-seed Chiefs, and yet again the 1-seed wins, but in a much more entertaining game. The Chiefs scored 23 while the Bengals only put up 20.
Yeah, this was kind of a back and forth game with the Chiefs pulling out early, the Bengals coming back and tying it shortly after halftime. This was really the best game of the day, obviously, between the two. But it was just the Chiefs were just too much to overcome for the Bengals to overcome with that offensive line being their Achilles heel. For the Bengals, they were missing 3 starters. They had a 4th one go down mid-game. I mean, that offensive line was down to just the skin and bones, and you could tell that Chris Jones and the rest of that Chiefs defensive line were just able to dominate that Bengals offensive line. More of what I thought we would see last week we saw this week with those trenches being just dominated by the Chiefs.
Yeah, like Callum mentioned, I really thought Buffalo was going to be able to take advantage of the offensive line of the Bengals the way the Chiefs did. But the Chiefs did that, to say the least. They absolutely destroyed the Bengals offensive line all across the board. They had Chris Jones playing every position on the line and just winning at every position on the line, which was really the key factor in this game. The Chiefs played well. Mahomes on his ankle. It's already being called the ankle game, like the flu game for Jordan. I don't think it's quite that extreme, but considering he was actually injured, he did play really well. You could tell that he was playing through some stuff and showing up for his team. And if you look at the Bengals side, I really think this was one of the lesser games they played all season. They had some low lows in the regular season. They had a couple of really crappy games, but this was not one of their best games, to say the least. And we talked about the Bills having one of their worst games last week. This is a really bad time to have your worst game. You're talking about in the AFC Championship game. One thing I did want to point out about this game, though, very questionable officiating.
Yes.
There were a lot of different things, both in this game and in the earlier game, and really throughout the playoffs and season as a whole. There's been a lot of questionable officiating, but I especially noticed it in this game. In the earlier game, you had some smaller things like, did the punt hit the camera wire and all of those things, but officiating didn't really change much in that game. The big Devontae Smith catch, that wasn't actually a catch.
Turned out to be incomplete later.
I don't think that would have changed the outcome of the game, really, though. A few of the things in this game might have changed the outcome, though. You had that 3rd and 9 that they gave them a redo on. The Chiefs didn't end up scoring on that drive, but that's still a lot of momentum that would have been going the Bengals' way, especially considering they stopped them once on 3rd and 9 and then got a sack again on 3rd and 9, but then was given a holding call that gave the Chiefs a first down, a defensive holding call. And just a lot of small things like that in a 3-point game really might have changed the outcome in the end.
Yeah, I mean, even though, like you said, they didn't get any points off of that whole redoing the 3rd down play, but that took another two or so minutes off the clock, where the Bengals would have gotten the ball back off a punt. But instead, they called the punt team off and made them replay 3rd down after the play was already had been played, which is just bizarre. I've never seen that
That
before.
was one of the craziest things I've ever seen, yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely wild. So if that doesn't happen, I don't know. Maybe things fall more the Cincinnati's way, but the way that offensive line was put together, I don't know if they were going to be able to survive either way.
Yeah, even if you give them a 2-minute drill to tie it at the end, that's just another sack or two for Chris Jones at the end of the day, I think. So maybe it didn't change the outcome. Maybe it did. Definitely something to look into, though. So that was our reactions to the conference championship game. Thank you all so much for watching, and keep an eye out tomorrow when we have our predictions, not for the Super Bowl, but for the NFL Honors Awards. But until then, don't forget
To eat the W.